Dr. Brady, section of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Minutes are approved. Unfinished business, proposed council amendment to council rules.
In front of you, you have a copy of revised council rule 7, addressing council during meetings. If you recall, last year we made some modifications to kind of randomize folks that called throughout the day. We left in place probably a more traditional, as people called in the morning, they were randomized, but then they called in the afternoon, they were just added to the end of the agenda. The administrative committee asked for a slight modification of that. That was to maximize the number of speakers that would be put in priority order throughout the day. So what you see in front of you is something that, from currently from 8 to 1 p.m. callers are put in one of the 4 priority groups, and then randomized at 1 to 5 callers are placed at the end of the complete list in the order they called. So what we're really doing is just simply extending that time from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we're going to capture most of the people in the randomization. That'll give Jackie an hour. At the end of the day, when she's doing that randomization, we'll be putting people in order. But the one difference is we'll be putting people in order by priority list. So for example, if you're talking about a non-agenda item and then you haven't spoken in the last 2 meetings, you would be prioritized. If you call at 4:30, you're going to go at the bottom of the 3rd list. So everybody essentially will be by priority list, but that'll still preserve that time to create the random. It's pretty exciting stuff.
You guys get comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah, she is. I have talked to Jackie about it. She is comfortable with it.
What we were asking. So the procedure is to put this on the agenda for next meeting and then approve at the next meeting.
Yep.
More accurately, voted on at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Excellent. Can I have a motion, please, to do that? Moved by Medina Watson. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Do that has been passed. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Draft litigation resolution.
So in front of you, you have a draft of the resolution clarifying that the city attorney is permitted to initiate and pursue litigation on behalf of the city, either for the city or its defense. When we last spoke about this, I brought up the issue that it's not, even though the charter says that the office represents the city, it is not listed on the authority granted to the office of the city attorney. And we discussed drafting the resolution to make this authority clearer. And this is the draft that would do that. So if you would like to give feedback on it, if you'd like to peruse it, bring it to the next meeting, that's fine too. But at some point, I would like a resolution which clarifies that the office of the city attorney is authorized to act on behalf of the city. And I suppose the one thing I would highlight to you, most of it is routine. One of the things that I would highlight to you is that we put in examples of things that happen in lawsuits, such as ADR, appeals. What I'd like to point out is that it lists amicus briefs, and if that is something that you would like pre-notice of, I can definitely do that. But sometimes we get very little notice of when to file an amicus brief. So in the past, we've had to come to council post facto asking for endorsement of having filed the amicus brief, and I'd like to avoid that. That's why I list amicus brief proactively. Of course, I will always report to you if that happens. I also made clear that we are only authorized to enter into settlements as a class member. So this would be like the opioid settlements, for example, where we are affirmatively receiving money. If we were going to settle as a defendant, that's not listed here. I would come to it. That's all.
Well, I just want to, I think that's for this question. Is that, as you're saying, like we've had the request come in quick and have a short timeline, but is that guided, the responses to that from your office, is that guided by our policy agenda document or by other council resolution? Like, in the sense of like, what gives you an idea of like the thing we probably want? Okay.
Yes, the policy agenda document that you set and other policies that council has set by resolution.
Is there do you think that would be worth including in a whereas or like?
Actually, I think that's a good point. I would definitely clarify that to be guided by the policy agenda document and by council's other resolutions. I will clarify that.
I think otherwise we will do it.
Perhaps with a non-exclusive invitation.
Yeah, not
Okay.
It's something to consider, which
we don't have a.
exactly.
But as long as they don't think we really be against it, you know, reasonable doubt that we. So this is all for not use for in the future.
But we have to be cognizant. So I will draft a resolution that clarifies that either there's a policy agenda document or a resolution or general guidance from council on which the amicus brief will be based. Yeah.
Sure. I think for my part, just looking at it quickly, it basically rings right. I would want it clear that the litigation or other legal action or resolve tracks the litigation or other legal action in the whereas.
Okay.
I think that's how it would probably ordinarily be interpreted. It makes sense to define term that, I think.
Yes.
The number of instances in which, in my view, there's good opportunities for mischief, particularly with respect to appeals. And so I think it's proper that the call in some places that be called out the specificity as these cases in the rest. I think that is additional time.
Okay. Taking no
CPN field. We're going to feel much for you to be older. Yeah.
I will circulate a redraft, but I will plan on bringing it to council, the full council in June.
You need a resolution.
Yes.
Motion to do that very thing. Moved by Iyer. Great. Discussion? In favor? Opposed? Thank you. These are upgrades regarding development potential of City Hall Promenade.
Not much of an update. I can just tell you kind of how things would unfold. So at the budget presentation on the 17th of April, you heard me address the why. You also heard me address the what. So given the amount of work that is involved in actually doing what I'm talking about, we needed to be completely transparent with you before anything happened. So there would never be a question if people didn't know, et cetera, et cetera. Assuming there's no categorical opposition to it, you begin with a structural analysis of the site. What is the load that the site can handle? That gives you a clue as to how vertical you can be. The what, to me, is a market rate transaction that can generate revenue that comes back to the city. And looking at the site, it's not just the promenade area, it's the parking area that's adjacent to it. You got to look at the whole footprint and determine what's possible. So one of two ways cities can go when they're considering something like this. We can predetermine what we want to see and then go see who can build it. Or you could ask generically to the marketplace, these are the dimensions of the site, give us your best plan as to what could go on the site. We would have a recommendation to you as to which course of action we would propose, but that's sort of a down the road kind of thing. Because we are who we are, to me, it only makes sense if we're going to do it, that we model the behavior that we find favorable. So you'd want the development to be all electric, because we would then be demonstrating what's possible. We would be demonstrating there is a market for it. And then not putting the formality of a TIF on it, a project TIF, which some cities use a lot. Let's just put the TIF word over here and say, we would simply capture the revenue that spins off the building and then use that revenue to reimagine this building. Because prior to COVID, we had 7 floors full of people 5 days a week. You're never going to have that again, ever. Because COVID has changed the way work is done. Since I've come here, I've instituted a permanent hybrid work environment, but we reserve the right in the administrator's office to reel it back if people aren't getting work done, or people aren't getting work done. So essentially you have some people here 2 days a week, some people here 5 days a week, some people here 1 day a week. And you wish you had laptop stock. That's how it's happening. I think it's a bold move for the city. I think it's visionary for us to consider it. And you only asked me about this lot, so it's on the one I'm talking about. Assuming that we get past the budget on Monday and council doesn't say don't do it, starting May 16th, I'm off. To get into it. Then I'll be able to come back to you with something specific. But it's not efficient to do a whole bunch of work before I even told you we have an interest in doing, because then it's just wasted time. So that's kind of how I see it unfolding. But it's doable. I know it is doable.
Thanks for that. I think that was that's what I was interested in, is kind of a little bit more about the how, because I wasn't sure if you were looking for a resolution from council to kind of get started, or if there were, I noticed there wasn't anything in the budget. At least I don't think there's anything in the budget around sort of funding for that structural analysis. I wanted to see if there were pieces in there that if we wanted to show us like enthusiasm about this, that we needed in the budget on Monday.
A resolution of support is helpful. It's not mandatory, but if you approve of looking into it and you want to be on the record saying that, that's fantastic. As to what money, again, we're kind of shooting in the dark. I'll come to you if we need something, but we'll try to figure out how to get it done. But it's a kind of project that would enable a lot of folks to be excited about working on it, because it's not the run-of-the-mill kind of thing, So my style of doing things like this can take a team. Issues. And then I would hopefully, come to you. And then the second phase of that, if assuming it all worked out, we have to do a process to reimagine this building. Just let that lie for now. The answer is what you wanted to hear now.
But I need to thank you.
You're welcome.
So in terms of the building being a revenue source for this building. So I guess
You simply capture it and you don't, it doesn't go into the big whole general fund. We would calculate what the building would spin off based on the kind of development we put on the site. And then we figure out, just like we did with roads, are we going to spin it off as cash or are we going to spin it off and try to leverage it? Too early to say because I don't know what we're talking about. But, you know, in my head, it's high-end market rate, high-level finishes. You want to charge as much as possible. You want this thing to generate as much cash as possible. That's why I did not say, let's use it for affordable housing. That's not going to get us where we're trying to go with the project.
Councilman? Thank you. The hiring process and timeline.
This is another case of where the what and the how have to match up. So our search firm, we've done the preliminary engagement process. Preliminary engagement is a number of one-on-ones, and then there's a short survey that was some community folks. There's been involvement from PICPOC from the very beginning. And met with them before we got started and given them the services that they be involved every step of the way. So it's all down to on the job position bulletin that we've come up with. Timeline, I would project at this point being mid-August to beginning of September for when to start. Because we've got to have a process on the back end too. So it's the narrowing it down, it's the interviewing, it's the what does community engagement look like? It's promoting what the engagement process is. It's the second round interviews and then coming to you with a recommendation per the charter. You have to, well, the council has to affirm the appointment. So that, you know, takes a little time to get it on the docket, but then we execute.
August to September for a start, you said, and if so, has a posting that like it? Is there a position out there for people to be submitting?
No, and it should happen in a few days.
Okay. And then you are still envisioning a community engagement process with the applicant?
Yeah, I think for a position like this, I think you have to do that. If you don't, you just asking trouble.
Okay.
Yeah, along the same lines, I mean, are you envisioning something similar to like IPSI's process where like 3 finalists are announced, some number of finalists are announced, and then that's, or yeah, is there a structure that you're envisioning announcing?
I don't know what process they use.
So that's the structure.
But certainly it would be transparent where everyone knows who the finalists are. And having gone through this a bunch of times, from the day you do that, you're going to get, well, I'm going to get flooded.
Yeah.
There'll be, you know, everyone will do their own deep dive on every person and then share what they think about it. That's just something that happens.
Could we also just keep this as just kind of an update in the process for our next few admin meetings too? The reason I ask that is simply because this is probably, it's a visible enough hire in the community and important enough one that I probably am asked about it twice a week, if not more, from constituents about where we are in the process. Some wanting to know why we're doing it. When it appears to them that we have achieved like all of, so I guess just having some visibility around that for me to be able to communicate back up to them is helpful.
I will be happy to do that. And the one thing I can say regarding to the last point that you made, one of the things that ICPOC told me multiple times is that last time around, they didn't feel like there was much of a choice. I'm committed to making sure there's going to be a choice. So you can't do that if you don't really get out there and do a real search.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more communicating. I don't think the public has, from the questions I'm getting, I don't think that a lot of the members of the public think they know what's going on with this.
I got you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any discussion for the administrative evaluation process and timeline?
I can go first.
You'd be the only one because I'm not due yet.
Well, I'm actually on the timeline. My review is also not due till July. That's what my contract says. But I have started the process of understanding how it was done in the past, and I'm going to perhaps improve on it a little bit and build from there. But next month, so June, I'll be more prepared to tell you exactly the questions that I propose and things like that. But it's under the contract, it's the timeline is July.
It's a question. I'm not clear what the expectation is for me. I'm not used to doing anything, so I don't know what it is you would want me to do.
What do you mean by that?
I've never been involved in orchestrating my own evaluation. Someone else does that.
Right.
And then they come and tell me, here's what it is. If the expectation is I need to figure the process out.
And I think that is why I added this. So I was not on admin the last time that one of these have happened. And so mostly I added this for my own education as well about what our process is, and particularly like in this case, planning that out. It feels like that's probably an important role for us as an admin committee. And so maybe a question more to you.
Well, in years past, and I think we sort of engaged this starting with the attorney, Amy Zell has been the sort of external. Well, historically, the question shall it be, will HR be running the show or will it be external? And in years past, it's both. Of late, it has been external, with maybe Zell running the question development and then ultimately questionnaire processing. Question development has typically been done in conjunction with the admin, but also, of course, with the employee. And so, once the employee, as either of you, is content with the nature of the survey tool, the persons to whom the survey tool is distributed, then she lets fly, and she administers the tool. She organizes the findings. She characterizes the findings. She distributes them to the group and well to the individual, of course, on the upfront, and then to the group, and then. Is that consistent with?
That is consistent with what I had learned from understanding the process. I also met with Mr. Costino to understand how it was done.
Yeah.
And that is what he explained to me. So, and at the last meeting, you all had indicated that if I wanted to work with somebody other than Amy, that would be amenable to that. But I think this year I prefer to work with Amy because one of us should have the benefit of experience of doing it. And then maybe next year we can evaluate. But yes, I was going to work with her to figure out the list of questions, the recipients of questions, and then propose that to you. That's, yeah, that's how it would go.
Great, and so, and that is something that the, well, you know, we're lightly staffed at the council side, and so total. So the mechanism is that the employee working with her to get that up off the back.
I'll leave the July timeline because I want to exit.
Excellent. So that's your period that will constitute a waiver of our breach. Anything on that?
That is question from my understanding.
Okay. You all have any, either Mr. Attorney have any further on that?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, super. Discussion of process criteria for Councilmember work session requests.
I also added this. I felt like maybe this was a group to have this conversation.
Yeah.
I have been approached a couple of times by colleagues who would like to better understand what the process is for requesting a work session on a given topic. I know that we've kind of had discussions before about not necessarily bringing back a standing work session and then trying to make up content for it, but rather as topics might come up, what is the process we're trying to request one of those and get something scheduled. And so I wanted to raise it with this body, want to take the temperature on whether or not we've maybe shifted a little bit and wanting to return to some work sessions as needed. But particularly because we have a younger council, I know that at least some of our colleagues have expressed to me that they sometimes feel like a deeper dive into certain issues might be beneficial. And so I just wanted to broach that topic here.
I mean, for my part, I think it's a good one. I think, you know, I certainly have no opposition to doing work sessions if they're needed. But the way you put it is, you know, I think you put it very well, that the way it was done in the past was it was a standing thing, and let's, you know, just try and make up some reason for a meeting. And I think, I don't know if it's COVID, you know, I think it's another post-COVID thing where people have just kind of had it with unnecessary meetings, right? And meetings that don't really need to happen. So developing, I guess, some sort of criteria, and I don't know if it's we vote on it as a body. You know, if enough people want to have one on a certain topic, or
optional.
Yeah, maybe there's, you know, some, or maybe it's, you know, 5, you know, just so it doesn't have to be a council. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that we need to figure out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the thing that we also acknowledging that, like, there is additional staff needs in going into these meetings, right? There's needs for staff to be present, there's needs, all of that additional stuff. And so wanting to be cognizant of, like, using these for very specific, like, valuable purposes, but also having a clear process so that, you know, one, we can't go around and get, like, well, you know, 6 of us want to do this, so that's the majority, like, we can't do that. So is there a lower threshold where we say, you know, 3 council members have requested a work session, and so now, you know, we as a body, or do we put it on, or do we schedule one, or do we put it on the agenda like we would anything else and actually vote to have a work session?
I guess one thing.
No, you know.
No, well, I guess one thing about a work session is, like, I mean, yeah, I guess any council meeting is optional, but I think there's. You know, personally, I'm responsible. But right, so I guess if people, like, yeah, I think there's something to say of, like, if 4 people commit, or 4 or 5 people commit to coming, is that worth it? Because even if we have it, other people aren't there, and that's kind of their choice, I guess. But I guess another thing is, yes, it maybe takes a little more staff time, but maybe it also saves staff time instead of having, you know, a 1 p.m. meeting, a 3 p.m. meeting, like 11 midday meetings. I guess my only question is, if it's at 4 p.m., it seems sometimes like, during the day meetings should be harder, and, council Mondays at 7 p.m., I don't know if there's possibility for work sessions outside of the 9 to 5 hours, but I guess that would be my two questions of,
Typically, work sessions at the intervening Mondays.
But at the council time. Okay, cool, yeah, because the planning session is earlier.
Yes, that's right. If, the planning session, well, that is contemplated to extend for a number of hours with the typical work session.
Okay, well, that's good, yeah, good clarification. So that'd be good with the 7.
So having been one of the people who's requested a work session, I feel like it created a extra work for you in some ways, trying to negotiate when would council members possibly be available to do this. Is there, and admittedly, the topic that I requested was a little unusual in terms of what I think is our previous practice for work sessions, which is around homelessness and kind of where we're at in our community, because of emerging topic in our community. It was a little unusual based on kind of past practice, but I do think that there is some merit in having a standing time for work sessions that, even if it's not on a monthly basis, that but whatever time frame we would identify, that would be that we have reserved on our calendars, and that we would have an expectation that would be a time that we should be present to the hall to be giving information, and whatever those topics are. It's very difficult to negotiate 11 schedules plus staff members. There's a reason for a standing meeting time, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, I guess the question to some degree that I have for staff is, what degree have you felt as we have transitioned away from having a standing work session time?
Does that think good or bad?
Yeah, are there, does it feel like there's maybe some topics that it would be helpful to be able to have that time of council to go a little more in-depth stuff, and at what frequency might that make sense?
Yeah, if I could just piggyback onto that, because it's kind of the same question, but worded a little differently. Can you think of instances recently or topics? I'm thinking of one in particular where, you needed to update council individually on a big issue, right? And would that have been better in a work session, or is it better the way you're doing it?
It probably depends. To be fair, when I arrived, you already weren't doing it. So it's never been a routine thing that I've been involved in. We did the December planning meeting, and I started in October. And we used that December planning meeting in 21 to present the 4 pillars of the budget, because when I got here, the process was already underway. We needed a quick way to daylight the council kind of where we were headed. So we used a process that was 5 hours, at least scheduled for. In my mind, it should never take us 5 hours to tell you anything. If we can't do it in 3, we got to rethink what we're doing. We did the one in January, which was pushed back. And, I can't speak to what's happened there before. I can just say that the administrator's office has set a standard with the way we do things now. We cannot do a work session in half step. It has to be pristine, prepared. Everybody's got to know their role, and we put a lot of time into it. So it's not something we could do with great regularity, because we need lead time to really bring all the information together. The item that Councilmember Briggs and others requested regarding homelessness, That's more of us facilitating a meeting because we're not going to be the presenters. We're simply inviting other people from the community to come tell you what they're doing. I'll be there to maybe introduce people, but there will be no city presenters in that session. But if you're asking me, kind of what we think about it, and the mayor and I have had many conversations about this. My thing is that we're making videos and nobody's watching. Tell us that, because we put a lot of time into doing the videos. If they're not helpful, then let's quit doing it. If there's another tool that you all want, we're here to serve you. I don't know that there is a session that would have been helpful, and maybe I'm too close to it, because one of the things I heard coming in the door was there's not enough communication and you're not hearing about things when they happen. Well, I saw that. In real time, you hear from me when something breaks, or you get a memo that lays out what's going on. And then you get periodic council communications that sort of updates. Here's what we're doing, here's what's happened over the last several weeks. And then you get a year in from me, and then we do a year in report. So from our end, we feel like we're communicating. The one area where we may need a conversation is around the expectation for winter. Because we've now concluded we are ill-equipped to run shelters. And I don't mind saying that out loud, but if the expectation is city employees need to be the ones doing it, we got to talk about it. It just was too much of a load. It caused all kinds of internal issues, but we were in the moment, so we did it. But that shouldn't be the go-to expectation. So maybe a conversation around winter, if we're going to have, as the scientists say, more of these inclement weather, hopefully not 8 days, and then, snow right behind ice. But other than that, and John, you speak freely if you think differently. I'm not aware of a topic that we didn't brief you on that you needed a deeper dive and we didn't get to.
I think, if I could maybe jump in to clarify on that, I think for me, it's less about it that I don't think the request for work sessions is a critique of staff providing information. I think it's maybe a critique of how information is being received. In that, I think, for example, that even in the budget session that we did, when we're watching a video, we're receiving that information. But Chris might ask a question I wouldn't think of that makes me view the information differently, or Erica may, or whomever, and it gets us talking about it in a different way than if we're just receiving the information. And I think what made me really put this back on the agenda, because I know I've had kind of some offshoot conversations with different members about work sessions, as each of them has had individual topics they'd like to maybe have a deeper dive into. But I think hearing some of the public comment at the last council meeting, at the budget presentation around, in years past, it felt like there was a lot more discussion of the budget ahead of time. It felt like there were a lot more questions. I think a lot of that is now being lost on the public as well in some respects, in that they're maybe not looking at the videos or they're in a way that we would, and whereas they would if we were on CCN and having, a conversation about a specific topic. And so I think that's twofold. One, for the public, but also just because, we think about things differently when we're engaging with one another. And so I think it's less about a topic that maybe you wish we would get more information about, and more, are there topics? I can think of a really good example from this meeting. In the future, would it be more beneficial for us to have a work session around the future potential development of the Promenade as opposed to getting a video on it and digesting information? I think it probably would, from both our perspective, but also from staff, actually hearing all of our individual pieces of feedback. Is there a ton of enthusiasm? I think you'd be able to gauge from that meeting.
It's a well taken point. I think that often we talk to staff and, there'll be something like, well, we haven't really gauged the will of council. And I mean, that'd be at least more of an informal, I mean, obviously, yeah, I think just as much as it is, better than the individual meetings over time where, like, there's an argument could be made to get some sense of some part of the will of council sticker, but
I offer an observation following on, I think, your last couple of comments here. When we did do the regular work sessions, we had, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, we had one scheduled a month, right? For the most part.
Except for budget season, we had two.
Okay.
In February and March.
Most of the work sessions were, they're all a lot of work. Most of them didn't have the kind of engaged discussion, but several of them did. And so, roughly 2 to 4 times a year, there was a really active, really important work session that was really valuable. It was difficult to guess which one it would be because oftentimes it was dictated by whatever issue was kind of really public at the time or had interest from council. But for the other, 8-ish, it was, they were quick, quiet evenings. And so I think that may have led to, certainly the pandemic was the main impetus to say we shouldn't be doing these. But I think that in the background, there's that issue as well, which is there is value here. And I think part of what we're hearing is it's hard to really put our finger on how to recreate that value. But there is also probably quite a bit of wasted time as well. I don't know if that's a helpful comment, but it's
and that's where I was wondering if there are, not necessarily saying that we need to have one every month, but if there's a specific topic that staff feels like it would be beneficial for us to have a conversation around, or if there are, a subset of council members that it is one of those issues that's bubbling to the top in the community, and 5 council members or 6 council members are coming to you and saying, should we have a work session on this? We should probably have a process of following work session. And that's I guess where I wanted that to go, is to figure out what, if we don't have a standing meeting that we're creating content for every month, what is the process for getting that as needed session on the agenda?
I think there's value in having a possible meeting. There's value in having a date identified just for people planning. I don't know whether people are going to stay in town for the meeting that may not happen, but at least they would know that. And so, to talk it out, I guess to talk it out, I mean, maybe the first or the second Monday of every quarter is set for a maybe work session. And then if 5 council members, pitch a work session, then that's sufficient of people being interested enough to have a work session, and we roll with that. That's how it works.
Sounds good to me. A lot of staff, I think, have offered word-specific, like quarterly check-ins. And for that quarterly idea, I think that's been working. So because that's what informs that timeline to me.
I'll say, I would concur with most everything that John said about the work session, with the exception of the shortness of them.
Well, if you're going to put the work into it, all the time.
That's right. And these usually multiple-hour meetings, and that's multiple hours. Just the account members show up and experience. Obviously, a great deal of work for that. The cross conversation is sometimes useful. It all depends upon the nature of the participants. The communication from council members to staff to sort of get a vibe can, I suppose, be useful. I'm not sure I would have given. John seems to have suggested a 25% success rate. Maybe I don't know that I'd go that high, but I do recognize that a little bit situated in many members because a lot of the stuff is cycling back to me. So if members of the body want to have work sessions, let us do it.
I guess the one difference, the sessions that we've done since I've been here have been 5 or 6 topics. What I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing is the session would be 1 topic.
Correct.
So if we're taking a deep dive into 1 topic, that's not 3 hours, that's like an hour and a half.
I'd push on that, like, that's kind of a game day, not a game day, that's a session by session decision. If, for example, 5 members wanted a topic X, and they said, you know, they came to us, they probably should just go to staff and say, like, the 5 of us want this topic. You would be in a position to say, that sounds like an hour, or that sounds like 3. And if there were another topic that rolled in, you would, I think, be in a position to either on the, you know, the administrator's office own lights, or in conjunction with the administration committee, say, we've had 2 parallel requests for these for work sessions on these topics. In staff view, this can be bundled into 1 meeting. What do you all think of that? Does that dishonor the request, or is that consistent with the request? You see what I mean?
I do, and so don't take what I'm about to say as pushing back on what you just said.
Yeah, I wish you could feel free.
The communications background I had, if we can't tell you what we're doing in this much time, we've not done our job. It won't take us an hour and a half to tell you whatever that it is.
That is,
it's the conversation piece that you don't know. But for us to get the info out there, we don't need 3 hours.
no, certainly, you would not need 3 hours worth of video to tell us, right?
Right.
The result of this conversation will be a conversation that's going to take an hour and a half, where the result of this conversation is going to be an hour conversation, 20 minutes of which is going to be staff's, you know, succinct and ball filled, you know, presentation. 40 minutes of it will be, you know, counsel, you know, expressing its wisdom among us back to you. Okay.
Make a sort of a tangential comment about the budget process specifically. I think the point is well taken, and I feel it too, that there's something lost with council members not hearing each other's questions in those work sessions that we used to have. We submit our questions. I'm wondering if there is a way for council members to see in real time what our colleagues have asked, to sort of, you know, these, I'm not making myself clear. I think a lot of, you guys, I thought,
But when people, yeah, well, the one thing is when people submit the same questions, they do say like, see previous question asked by so-and-so. But yeah, we don't know in real, right, the discuss, I do just saying, replicating the discussion point and knowing what's floating around in other people's heads.
right. Maybe for something, if I know, like, you know, Eric and I happen to have a conversation this week about a couple of things, but I don't know until the questions come out what everyone else is asking. That makes for her questions for some additional questions for me that spun off of that. So if we could see those some way, I think, you know, the public daylighted, right? Because we can't be having these conversations with all 11 of us, you know, secretly. Obviously, we don't want to do that. Something to think about.
It is. Last year, Sarah can correct me, I believe we had a total of 8 budget questions. We're at 76 this time.
Yeah.
So you could probably figure out a way that you know what's coming in, but it varies how long it takes to answer them depending on what's being asked.
I don't mean the answers. I just need the question.
Just the question.
Just to be able to see, just to be able to see the question. So I know, you know, what's rolling around in Travis's head.
And while you're answering that question, here's like a one little teeny bullet off of that. Or, yeah.
Well, that's, I will say, that's why the rolling nature, I do want to say that I appreciate the rolling nature of the process that they come out on Friday, like the budget question process. We did one that they come out on Friday and I did get some in on that right at the deadline that I was building off a couple ones with other companies. So I just want to, I did want to say that that's a good process and expanding that maybe to other issues in the way that Jim's saying that we've seen the questions on issues of not just like the budget and not after they're answered. I think there's value there because I saw it in the nature of budget questions.
It might save some time on your part too, just because, like you said, if someone submits a question and then I have one that kind of builds on it, they can all be done at once rather than. Anyway. This is probably entirely too much time spent on this one.
That is more likely to work in an environment with high level of trust and confidence in members, and less competition. There's some instances in which in which at least some measure of confidentiality or between member and staff would be desired.
So those questions all come out
Eventually,
on the Friday or whatever.
Yeah.
But yes, I do think that years in the biennial budget are not quite as big of a, you can expect less questions hopefully next year than this year. But personally, I do think that there's merit to us having work sessions in person around the budget. We're all seeing the information at the same time. It requires us to think about it at a point in time as opposed to when do we find time in our schedules to watch that set of videos. And I think you're kind of seeing questions roll in a little bit later around certain topics, probably based on when people have kind of watched certain segments of videos and stuff like that. And then there's the crunch time right in their deadline. So I think it might bring it forward a little bit and give us a little bit more time to have some of those get answers to our questions earlier in the process and have more time to be able to plan out some of those, do some of the work around the budget. It helps to have those sessions in person. My preference of future years. Other things open.
But what would happen in a budget work session?
In a budget work session, there would be a presentation from the various service area administrators, and they would run through essentially changes that they're making to from prior service. So we are looking, and with the options that the service area administrator is presenting to the administrator these options. There's the option for expanding this service, contracting that service with spreadsheets of like how much we're saving here, how much we're increasing spending there, depending upon the economic condition. Typically, that would involve, if we're in a cut year, reductions in excess of the goal. And the administrator would then pick and choose and ultimately present to the council administrator's budget. There's some benefit in having that prior information in that it provides members a little bit of an opportunity to to be more mindful about what they're adding or subtracting. I see that there was a potential study in public services for this roadway that was not included in the administrator's budget. That potential study was estimated to cost $250,000. I'm going to propose to cut this additional component of the public services budget and substitute that study for purpose. And that would be a budget amendment. That would be a budget neutral budget amendment that would involve, a shift of priorities to privilege that to the desired study over some other item. Does that make sense?
It does. It'll call for discipline on our side.
Yeah.
But sometimes, not here, sometimes employees decide to undermine the administrator and they're trying to get a deal with the council person directly.
Yeah.
It's a no-no for me, but
Yeah,
it happens.
sure.
But I hear what you're saying.
And there would be high visibility on that.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I hear is a desire to, I guess we pencil in, this would be a amendment ultimately to the council calendar to pencil in potential work sessions the second Monday of every quarter with an understanding to council members that to put items on a potential work session, should the spirit move you, that we gather essentially 5 members to communicate to the administrator the desired subject matter for a work session. And then the 5 would communicate with the administrator about whether it's a whole session, a half session, or does that seem right?
Yeah.
Does that require a motion? No,
I'm sorry, you were looking at me?
I was.
No, I don't think that's part.
Okay. Anyway,
It's not action by the council, right?
We would have to amend the.
you know, we will have to amend the
Council calendar.
council calendar. So perhaps it's a motion to amend the council calendar to reflect the hoo-ha that I just said.
It may also be beneficial. I mean, this is not something we have to do right now, but if we are actually laying out a process for requesting a work session, it may be beneficial for us to add that to it. I mean, to actually formalize that.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same as the question deadlines, yeah, I mean, I think it's the same idea.
Focusing on the amendment of the agenda question.
The agenda question, I mean, agenda question, not yet, agenda.
May I suggestion? I think, give Sarah and us some time to figure out how best to phrase this.
Yeah.
And then get back to you.
Yeah, I was not suggesting we should do it on the fly right here. Yeah.
I don't think we should make much to think about it.
I look forward to the result.
Okay.
Keep in mind too, we do have to have a fall work session because of our joint partnership agreement with the ZBA. So that's already on our calendars for October 10th. And then we always set aside this second Monday in December for our planning session, and that's already on the calendar. And then typically no work sessions in November. Okay. And historically, none in July or August.
Here is. Yeah, 2024.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Ashley. Construction. Is there any other new business? Information or upcoming business?
I'll just mention that when this is all over, maybe June, July, somewhere, somehow I'd like to get feedback on if you liked how we presented the budget. Because, I mean, you know, it needs to be effective. It really work for us, work for me. But we didn't know if there's something more you would want or less. Kind of crammed to do it right up front of the meeting, but that's how we do it. So I do it.
Yeah, I do the closed session.
You do.
You do.
Yes, I would like to call a closed session under NCL 15.268, section 8, regarding the provision confidential memorandum that was provided on May 9th, 2020.
Make a motion to go to closed session by Dr. Myers. Roll call will be starting with whoever the desire.
Yes.
Not your desire.
No, I remember it.
Yeah. No.
Because I don't, is there somebody online too?
Oh, yeah, so we go over there, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
You signed the open session by, Iowa, second, all in favor. Oh, not gonna send. We have some public comments. Would any public comment in this room? Well, not any public. All right, do we have public, I will not take the full recital, but 3 minutes, give you the time.
Yeah, you know, I'm not shy about doing this sort of thing. You all know me. I spoke on a number of issues in front of you, but I have a procedural question that I thought best to bring in front of the admin committee. And I don't want to take up much of your time. I know that Councilmember Rudin had an energy commission meeting in what? So you don't have to answer me today, or maybe there's a quick answer. But at the Naples Council meeting, at the very end of the meeting after closed session and back into open session, you amended the agenda to add a new agenda item instructing the city attorney to deliver public opinion in the California Record Association versus City of Berkeley case. So my question is, I have to admit this bothered me when it happened because there was no opportunity for public input into this resolution. So I went to the city rules, and to me, and again, I'm not familiar with these, it seems like there's a very well laid out procedure for introducing agenda items after the Thursday before the Monday of the meeting, including 5B in the city rules. And then if an item is supposed to be added at the council meeting in this manner, the proposed resolution would be publicly available on the agenda in the section entitled proposed items to be added to the agenda. And so again, maybe there's a simple answer to this, how this could happen, but I thought I'd bring it to this committee since it seems to be like the appropriate venue. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll probably respond after public comment, we'll talk to you. Would anyone online like to speak in public comment? Public comment has, which you can speak of comment, which speak with public comment, you'll be there to make the speak, so please pay close attention to the time. To speak in public comment, please indicate, raise your hand. Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Have a motion to adjourn debate. Move by. Watson and I are discussing. All in favor? Oh, adjourned. Thank you, everybody.